Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. I think we can get that right now with a 24 right in the date. And time for another show. I'm wrapped up in a little something, trying to settle things before the show, but obviously the show has intervened. But everything is working, and that's good news. Greg is ready and raring to go and has already got 500 stories in the pipeline here. The raft O stories, growing by the moment. So there's lots going on, lots to catch up on. And lots of things to watch out for today. I don't know. Here's what's occupying my time as the morning begins. Let's see, more protests, of course, breaking out on campuses and near campuses all over the country. Well, not all over the country, in several locations across the country. I think probably largely motivated by solidarity with the protests that were broken up at Columbia University. But interestingly, we're seeing, I guess, just really in any situation like this that catches fire and people are on their guard and watching and interested in promoting viral content or making content go viral. The latest information to hit my screen about protests being broken up was allegedly one broken up at the University of Minnesota, and information passed around around the same circles that we usually move in, and going pretty much viral on the story that students were arrested en masse at the University of Minnesota and were, kicked off campus for trespassing, but that in addition, in a rather swift move here, it is alleged that the students who were so arrested were banned from the campus for 1 year, which would mean, of course, that they can no longer take their classes, and some of them means wouldn't be able to graduate. They're not no access to their housing, et cetera, et cetera. However, that struck me pretty quickly as, well, geez, banned from the campus for a year. That just somehow there's something that just doesn't resonate about that. And as it appears to be turning out, there's no reports from any credible known news organizations that mention any sort of 1 year ban. The basics of the story was that an encampment was broken up, and most of these universities are rather aggressive in not letting these tent city protests linger, because the longer they linger, the more difficult it is to break them up. So they tend to move swiftly on it. They will break up your tent city, but they limit anyway. As it turns out, most of the reporting from Minnesota was that the arrests were limited to about 9 students out of the 300 or so who were there protesting. They did break up the tents, but no mention whatsoever of any 1 year ban or anything like it. It was kind of intriguing, and I can understand how that gets passed around quickly. But I think it originated elsewhere, and I'm not certain where, but apparently a lot of the time the references were to an outfit known as the Mint Press. Now, I've never heard of Mint Press, but people began to call that into question, and they can't get any confirmation about this anywhere else. There's no comment, I guess, from the university at this time, but the fact that none of the local news sources have anything about that worries me about that report. I just don't think that is going to hold. And then Mint Press, I'd never seen anything, but I didn't start researching them or anything. But as it turns out, Sarah Posner was also struck by this report as probably not true and began digging into it, and people are responding to her, and it's the picture is becoming clearer. But something else that Sarah also shared this morning was a link to a story that I put in pocket just because it's kind of interesting. But the headline of it is, and here, I don't know this organization either, but News Lines Magazine. And at any rate, the claim here by the author, Brian Whitaker, it's an older article. It's from November of 2021, saying the echo chamber of Syrian chemical weapons conspiracy theorists is the headline. And it's the subheader says, a collection of non-mainstream bloggers has been paid by a murky organization to parrot Assad regime and Kremlin falsehoods. Don't know. Haven't read it. I skimmed through it, but while I was skimming through it, what struck me was that there's a mention of Mint Press in here as one of the organizations that was involved in disseminating this information. So just a morning warning, because that rhymes. Once again, we're always admonished to be careful about our sources. And sometimes if the sources say that Donald Trump is farting in court, it's just too good to resist. And who could be hurt by, we know who could be hurt by Donald Trump actually farting in the courtroom. But, who could be hurt by passing on such a humorous report? Now, that's very different when you're talking about chemical weapons strikes or even 1-year bans from university campuses. But just a good warning that, once again, well-meaning folks can fall into that trap pretty easily, even if not so well-meaning folks are the ones originating it. And I don't know, be careful, I guess. There's plenty enough going on, and abuses enough going on for us to focus on that. And it'll be part of the roundup, I'm sure. Greg Dworkin is here. The raft of stories has arrived. Let's get started. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, David.
Yes. Oh,
with a W.
Yes. David W. Well, that's me.
Good warning.
Yes.
If we're going to talk about student protests, a couple of things. I think the main story is where the main protest got traction. That's Colombia. And Colombia has actually been discussing things with their protesters. It's interesting because the Colombia president hasn't agreed to sit down to an interview with Columbia Spectator, the student press, in like 6 months, which is really frustrating the Spectator, and I don't understand that. That's stupid.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, administration and students have agreed to disagree about some stuff. They've agreed to keep talking. Colombia's not going to crack down on them further as these constructive talks continue to take place. Mm-hmm. A confrontation was narrowly avoided with students over their sprawling protest encampment, but the university faced a swirl of doubts over the future of its president and her efforts to calm the campus in Upper Manhattan. Meanwhile, Mike Johnson, to pour fuel on the fire, wants to come to visit Jewish students at Columbia today. And Dr. Shafik, the Columbia head, is going to confer with the university senate, which could censure her as soon as Friday.
Yeah.
So what's not going to happen is the cops aren't going to be called in to clear protesters from the campus. She had given the protesters a midnight deadline on Tuesday evening, but that came and went because talks are going well.
Okay.
Whatever that means.
I don't know.
Throw into the mix the fact that there was a primary in Pennsylvania yesterday. Didn't seem to hurt Joe Biden. We'll get into that in a little bit. And it did seem to hurt Donald Trump because there's like a ton of Nikki Haley votes still. Even though Haley's off the ballot, even though this is a closed primary, so Republicans only, and Haley got 155,000 votes.
Wow. What's she going to do with
the margin in 2020 was 80,000 for Biden to win. So that's a significant number of votes. Can't just blow that off and say, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it does.
All right. But what if I did say that? That would
be
wrong.
You can say it, but it wouldn't be true.
Well, it might go viral.
And that's the other thing about what really struck me when you were talking about Mint Julep Press or whatever it's called.
Just Mint.
The thing is that we spent a day listening to a masterclass by David Pecker on how fake news is constructed and disseminated.
Yes, that's true.
And it just really, I learned all about that yesterday. That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I guess, like the Wilhelm scream, once you hear how it works, you never, it's a signal and you don't miss it all that easy.
You don't miss it.
Not never.
Exactly right. And
you miss it a lot,
I think
that's,
sure, that's, of course, one of the two big stories that we need to talk about today. You pick which one we do first, the trial or Congress.
Oh, All right. Well, we'll probably get to the trial. Why don't we do the Congress part?
Why don't we do the Congress? Sure. We'll absolutely get to the trial, and everybody has stuff to say about the trial. So here's the deal.
Thank you. Yes.
With Congress.
All right. What is the deal with Congress?
Here's the deal with Congress.
What's the deal
regular
with
order?
Guys? Yeah.
Jamie Dupre has just such a wonderful summary of
so
everything.
So regular, so ordered.
Okay, so he says we shouldn't gloss over what's happened in the past 6 weeks on Capitol Hill.
All right.
Despite all the gridlock, despite all the nasty political recriminations, despite unbelievable GOP dysfunction in the House, the Congress has been able to produce a series of major bills with strong bipartisan support.
All right.
March, lawmakers avoided a shutdown funded the government. After Easter, Congress passed a controversial bill to reauthorize foreign intelligence surveillance powers, known as the FISA Act.
Yes.
And now comes aid for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, and a host of other measures, including a bill to divest from TikTok and China.
Yes, right. A little troublesome.
So it's not a TikTok ban. That's not what it is. And by the way, that particular TikTok bill was cleverly crafted to take place after the election, should it happen.
All right.
I'm just pointing out that these are all enormous wins for Joe Biden.
I guess so. Is the TikTok one? Maybe.
Yeah, because he put it off.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. Oh, all the kids are going to get up in arms if Joe Biden bans TikTok. Well, he didn't.
Well, he might later, but that's okay.
They might get mad later.
Right, and then they definitely won't vote for him next time after that, for sure.
Right.
But yeah. All right. Well, that is clever. I was wondering where did that come from. But I could see them easily getting agreement on that because there's Republican
they don't want to deal
with
it
too.
Either.
Yeah. Okay. That is rather clever in the sense that
I have a proposal to make behind the scenes. Why don't we do it, but kick the can down the road in terms of the consequences? Congress, what do you think about that? Do you have any interest in such a concept?
Never heard of it before. Sounds intriguing. Let's try it.
Yeah, exactly. So Jamie Dupre writes, maybe the most important player in getting this aid package done was Mike Johnson, who helped navigate a GOP family feud in the House. But it's important to note that when Johnson finally stood up to the House Freedom Caucus, he ran them over with a bipartisan steamroller. All of those GOP threats of a motion to boot out the speaker now seem empty and weak. Don't get me wrong, Johnson's still in a tough spot, but he comes out of this stronger than a few weeks ago. And then, of course, the point is that Marjorie Taylor Greene looks really, 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 really weak.
Yes, she does. Again, I point out she's not actually part of the Freedom Caucus, which is crazy.
Yeah, she used to be.
But yeah, that's the amazing thing. They kicked her out of there. And good. I'm glad they did that. It makes her look weaker.
With Johnson too much.
But it all, yeah. And now she can't get them to not cooperate with her or not cooperate with Johnson alongside her, which is kind of amazing.
As I said before, she's not a lawmaker. She's a noisemaker.
Yeah, grogger.
And that's all. And so she likes to make noise.
Yeah.
So what happened is
that
they brought up a cloture vote
in the Senate. Yeah, okay.
In the Senate,
that's
on
the people
this very important foreign aid bill.
Yes,
and it passed 81 to 19.
All
and
right.
One of the people not voting because he wasn't there, which is wonderful, was Rand Paul.
Oh,
which is one of the reasons why it went so smoothly.
Well, that's nice. It always goes smoothly when Rand's not around.
Right. So. Then the actual bill final vote was 79 to 18.
Oh.
And so there's it's always interesting, the details. So the 18 no votes, 15 came from Senate Republicans: Barrasso, Blackburn, Braun, Budd, Cruz, Haggerty, Hawley, Ron Johnson.
Okay.
Mike Lee, Lummis, Marshall of Kansas, Rubio, who's running for vice president, Scott of Florida, Schmidt of Missouri, and Vance. Also voting against the plan were two Democrats, Merkley and Welsh, and Bernie Sanders, independent.
Okay.
So 3 Democratic no votes.
No's. Yes.
And missing Rand Paul, Tim Scott, South Carolina, who's also running for vice president.
I see.
And Tommy Tuberville.
Who was what? In the locker room.
who probably, just didn't understand what was going on.
I'm in the what? The Senate?
What? I have to do my responsibility. What?
Which way?
But here's
Where
the
am
interesting thing.
Yes.
Brit of Alabama.
Who even knows who that is?
Of Arkansas.
Yeah.
Gaines. Fisher of Nebraska. Ricketts of Nebraska. Lindsey Graham.
Oh my.
Hyde Smith, Mississippi. And Langford. And Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. These all switched from opposing this bill in February when it was married to border bill provisions to yes votes now. That's just fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, Langford was a no then because he liked the bill. Right. He negotiated the bill, but you didn't give him his bill, so he voted no. Now he said, look, that's all water under the bridge. You got to do this. So these 9 GOP senators made it a landslide by switching their votes. And, it's just really interesting that, this is the Winston Churchill observation about doing the right thing after you try everything else first. Yes. These guys actually came around and did the right thing. And it was, pretty remarkable. And it was an incredibly enormous, huge win. I mean, in terms of the size of the vote for both cloture and passage, it wasn't even close. And the same thing was true in the House. And so you step back and say, there's a lot of dead people in Ukraine because why? Theater? Kayfabe? Why?
Yes.
What was the point of
the there was a war.
You got less, and Biden got more than when you started it. What was the point?
Well, no one really knows. And, of course, the Ukrainian deaths don't make an impression on United States senators.
Yeah, I'm just saying that because it wasn't harmless. But, what did you get out of it? Why did you do it? You are diminished. Marjorie Taylor Greene is diminished. What did you win?
Well,
why did you do it? What's your point?
No one knows. I mean, sometimes you gamble and lose. That's true. But, they really just there was no plan. And the party is driven by a guy who notoriously has no plan for anything and just lashes out. And, hopefully the lesson is, hey, maybe our feeble subservience to an idiot isn't a great idea.
Right. Joe Lawrence writes in the Bulwark, 1 cheer for Republicans doing the right thing.
Hip, hip, meh.
Hip. Ukraine lives
is that the
to
3
fight
cheers?
Another day, but let's not give Republicans too much credit for finally doing their jobs. What I said on Twitter was, in effect, look, let's give Mike Johnson and Mitch McConnell credit where credit's due. They bucked the severe right-wing radicals in their party, and they did get this done. So they deserve credit for that. It's a plus on the ledger where their ledger has an incredible number of negative marks, but, it's still a plus. Give them that. Biden is the big winner. He did everything right, from keeping the issue open to not attacking Mike Johnson openly.
Okay.
And leaving the seeds for reconciliation, planted. And it worked. It just took a long time. It took longer than it should. It did get done. That's important. Biden will, probably sign it today, I would assume.
Sure, he's got time.
Perhaps the major thing Biden did was talk to Pete Buttigieg and somehow get Rand Paul, plane grounded so he wasn't in Washington and so everything went smooth.
Yes, it was a plot against it. I don't know.
So the deep state, shows up again. I don't know why Rand Paul wasn't there, but it doesn't matter. The important thing is he wasn't there.
Over. Yeah. Great, wonderful, terrific. I'm sure he would have, he would have gabbed for a while and then they would have shut him down with this cloture vote.
Right. So what did they get out of it in the end? This is Axios. Axios is a Republican-friendly outlet, not as Republican-friendly perhaps as Politico. Certainly not as Republican-friendly as Fox or National Enquirer. We'll get to that.
Okay.
But Axios is a relatively Republican-friendly place.
Okay, you say so. I believe it. It feels like it.
And here's their headline on this. How Republicans castrated themselves.
Humana. Okay. It's
That's what it
figurative,
says.
everyone. Figuratively.
Never before has the party in control of the House of Representatives knowingly and willingly castrated its own power so thoroughly as today's Republicans.
Well, that's true.
That's what you got out of it. Why did you do this? Why it matters. Republicans blew years of potential authority by weak leaders surrendering to keep power. So with a razor-thin GOP majority, Speaker Mike Johnson had to depend on Democrats. The structural changes they made the place ungovernable, a former member of GOP leadership told Axios.
Well, no,
of course, we know what he's talking about.
Yeah,
he's talking about the Speaker's Conference.
Yeah. Ungovernable by Republicans. I mean, it's governable. You just got to ask the people who know how to govern.
But not if you give
not
up
by you.
The Speaker's Conference. Then you can't pass rules.
Well, okay, that's true. Although they managed to govern, it's just they can't do it
with Democrats. Only with Democrats.
That's who can govern that place.
So when you give this many nihilists this kind of leverage, that's what's going to happen. It was just a matter of time.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about this show for months, and you know what? We were right.
Yeah, right. Well, it was pretty obvious. That's the way this thing has happened for 100 and something years.
Right, it was obvious.
Well, it wasn't obvious to everyone. You have to observe something that most people find tremendously boring and confusing in order to figure it out. But when you see it happen, well, like, gee whiz, the whole place runs based on the Rules Committee, and we no longer control the Rules Committee. Okay. And an interesting statement of it, of the problem, that they did all of this to, in pursuit of power. And what was the power? Apparently the power was to pick the color of that, and pick the color of the drapes and carpet in the fancy office that goes with it, but not the power to actually, make laws.
Or, save the world, or preserve NATO, or stop Putin from taking over a country that doesn't belong to him. Two mistakes haunt House Republicans, both dating back to Kevin McCarthy, letting any member call a vote on removing the Speaker. They didn't change that, interestingly. Mike Johnson decided, what's the difference? If I change it and make it harder to do, I'm only going to antagonize them, and I don't get anything out of it. They don't have the votes anyway, so I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
Surrendering authority of the Rules Committee, which sets the terms for how legislation will be handled during votes.
Yes.
After allowing non-loyalists onto the committee, leaders can't depend on getting their way.
Right.
Leaders can't lead if followers won't follow.
That's true.
Pretty simple. I don't know what McCarthy didn't understand about that.
Yeah. Oh, and also, I guess a less noble explanation for why Mike Johnson didn't bother changing the rule back. Where does a proposal to change the rules go first? What committee do you think would consider a change in the rules?
I
could be anyone.
I want to say judiciary.
Yes.
But I can't. It's rules.
Right. Yes. It's which rhymes
and
with
Democrats
Jules,
weren't going to go along with
what
that.
happens in castration. So, okay. Anyway.
Because Democrats want him castrated.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was a serious mistake. Yeah. Don't tell Joni Ernst. Hey, Joni, he was just kidding. She's into that with
GOP hardliners tried to block legislation again last week, only to have a GOP speaker call their bluff. Democrats crossed the aisle on the Rules Committee for the foreign aid bills, and former Speaker Ryan applauded Johnson.
Okay.
On the other side, McCarthy allies strongly push back on sharing blame for the chaos. They correctly say they were undoing changes that Pelosi did. Well, Pelosi had those rules because she had the same 4-vote majority and needed to get stuff done. That's why those rules were there. They can correctly say they were undoing changes from Pelosi, but you'd also have to add they correctly say they were undoing changes that made the House governable.
Yes, I guess so. I don't even know what they thought they were undoing, but whatever it would be, it was a bad idea.
The motion to vacate, for example.
Oh, but okay.
Pelosi had it so that you could only bring up a motion to vacate if leadership agreed.
Yeah, okay.
And they changed that. They made it so Marjorie Taylor Greene could do it.
Yeah. That was
a bad move.
Was that something that she imposed? It seems like that's the model usually for a lot of those privileged motions, is that they have to come from
that specific rule or tradition, or I don't know how you phrase it, was Pelosi's doing.
Okay. Interesting. It's amazing that it took that long to do.
They say The long-standing rule was a single member could call a motion. It's Pelosi who said, no, it has to go through leadership.
Okay.
So they went back to the way it used to be, and they showed why Pelosi made that change when you have a 4-vote majority.
Although, it's worth pointing out that I guess if the rule has always been that 100 years, nobody ever made that motion.
This is the funny part. The bottom line, GOP leaders knew they were sitting on a powder keg.
Yeah.
A GOP lawmaker told Axios, I told Kevin at the time I thought it was a mistake. He kept saying he wasn't going to agree to it. He wasn't, and then he agreed to it. It ended up being his demise. Well, it's true.
Yeah.
And why did Kevin McCarthy say no, yes? Because that's Kevin McCarthy, and that's why Democrats didn't trust him. And that's why the whole thing about, I don't understand why Democrats didn't save McCarthy, I'll never forgive them. It's just laughable. They didn't save McCarthy. Biden got everything he wanted. What's your point? What's their point? What's the point of the Freedom Caucus in trying to block things? Now they're incredibly diminished.
Yeah.
What's the point of saying it was bad to not support McCarthy? That was stupid. They didn't trust McCarthy, and they couldn't work with him. It's a vote of no confidence, and absolutely deserved.
Yeah. Amazing how they've diminished themselves with this, and they were not involved in this one either. It was the person they kicked out of their conference, their caucus, who was driving it and failed, and they somehow got tarred with it. And that's interesting.
Let me just throw in the 30 seconds or less we have, how McConnell and Schumer beat hardline conservatives on Ukraine. It's in Politico, and actually gives credit to Biden for pulling this off.
Politico? We were just told. I heard recently. Okay, well, that's good news. All right, well, we'll be right back, and we can, I don't know, we can discuss more of that. We can move to the trial. We got time.
Talk about the Pennsylvania primary.
Options. Oh, all right, we'll do that. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Welcome back, everybody, for the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We were just having a little discussion in the background. We were thinking about, we mentioned Mint Press, and that made us think of Jim DeMint, who has nothing to do with Mint Press, but has this, has the word Mint.
And now no longer has nothing to do with Heritage Foundation.
Yeah. So, right, that was the last I think I heard of him, and we were kind of like, is he still there? I don't see his name a whole lot anymore. But no, you say he was booted from Heritage in 2017.
Yeah, for being incompetent. But he's 72 now, and he founded a bunch of other organizations, but I don't really know what he's doing now.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's terrific. I'm glad to hear that we don't know what the hell he's up to. And
he's
Heritage
one of the
went
original Tea Party
anyway.
people, so, good riddance.
Yep, he's gone. So I don't know. I'll check him out after the show. Maybe we'll see if there's anything funny about what he's doing these days. Okay, well, let's see. We left off. We had just wrapped up the incompetence of congressional Republicans and having set themselves back several steps.
Right. And my friend Joe Lawrence reminds me something I said today in the pundit roundup, which is can't be said enough that Trump personally sandbagged the border security bill to make it a campaign issue. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing that went Biden's way.
Yeah.
There were people in the Democratic Party who were not happy with the triangulation idea of giving the Republicans part of what they wanted on the border.
Yeah. Well,
and Biden said, we need this grand bargain to get the Ukraine stuff. It's just, you got to do it. So Democrats are going to swallow their objections and do it. And Republicans said, no, even though we asked for it and you gave us what we wanted, we're not doing it because we need it as a campaign issue. And Biden said, okay. And Democrats said, all right, we can live with that because we didn't really love it anyway.
It was a huge miscalculation.
Yeah, and now Biden can say, look, I offered it to you. The only reason we don't have it is you said no. Don't look at me. You're saying I won't do it. I did it. Mm-hmm. You didn't do it.
Well, we'll see whether they can make that case
effectively on the campaign trail.
I hope it, and I hope they're sharp in doing it, and because it is something that if you ask me, do you think voters are oblivious enough that in a couple of months Trump can come around and say, yeah, well, Biden did nothing on the border, and Biden will say, well, we passed the thing you asked for, and then you decided you didn't want to ask for it anymore. Will that register with there are certainly people with whom will not.
Because Trump doesn't have any money and Biden does.
And
so
that
it goes in ads. And as a matter of fact, somebody's pointed out, Trump hasn't run any campaign ads since the South Carolina primary.
Is that right?
You know why? All the money's going for his legal fees. He doesn't have any money.
I think so. Yes, he's running up legal bills and he's sucking up all the cash. I don't have any proof that he's transferring that cash to the attorneys, but that's what it is said to be needed for.
Well, that's what's said to be happening because there's some investigations going on about one of his shell companies doing exactly that. Oh. And shell companies are corporations, and corporations can't do what other people can do in regard to transferring money.
Even though they're people, my friends.
Even though they're people, my friends. They're still corporate people. So,
okay.
There's some investigations going there. More to come on that.
He'll probably be tried
Just
for
some
that
stories
later.
Good morning. Eyebrows are being raised by a arrangement that Trump has to hide where some of the money's coming from for his legal fees in the midst of trials about Trump committing fraudulent paperwork about money going to various,
See?
Oh, well, maybe we should take this a little more seriously.
Yeah, you should put him on trial in a courtroom.
He's got a track record.
He does. And as I was reminding everybody, right, is he really... is he sucking up all this money and paying his lawyers with it? Well, he's sucking up all the money. Is he paying the lawyers? Well, some FEC reports say that he's paid some of these lawyers a couple $1 million. Yes, well, but remember, he's on trial for falsifying the information going into his FEC reports.
Right.
True.
Now, I just want one last word on the Pennsylvania primary yesterday that Biden and Trump won.
All right, Yes, let's go back to it.
And Rick Wilson summarized these headlines from various outlets, which I thought was pretty funny, especially clue into the last one. We're talking about important outlets that a lot of people read, and all of them, including the last one, qualify for that. So the New York Times headline, Trump wins Pennsylvania primary but remains haunted by Haley. Axios. Trump wins Pennsylvania, but Haley wins over 147,000 votes. I think it's like up to 155,000, something like that. Daily Beast, Trump bruised by another brutal protest vote in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Reuters, Haley voters persist in Pennsylvania as Biden-Trump sweeps state.
Yes.
Hindustan Times, Pennsylvania win a setback for Trump as Nikki emerges as the real winner.
Oh, yes, right, okay. So why are we reading the Hindustan Times? Oh, yes, okay.
Nikki Haley.
Nikki, good old Nikki. All right.
So, the point is there's a lot of voters there. And as we talked about in the beginning segment, enough to change the election. So we'll see what happens there. And before we move on to the New York courts, just a mention of the Supreme Court, which is to say national D.C. court.
Oh, those guys, yes.
Chris Geidner notes this morning, I'm off to SCOTUS where Idaho is arguing today that the Biden administration is wrong with its interpretation that the federal emergency room law, known as EMTALA, protects abortion care in limited emergency situations, even where states ban it. Now, this is an important case.
Okay.
And EMTALA is the law that says that if you show up in an emergency room and you have an emergency, they can't turn you away if they don't take your insurance.
Can't turn. Okay. Yes. All right.
They have to treat you.
Sensible.
Well, everybody's accepted that is like, okay, well, that's the way it is. Well, now that there are all these new abortion laws on the books, like in places like Arizona, and as it turns out, Idaho,
yes.
What happens if a woman shows up miscarrying and goes to the emergency room and the ER says, well, we don't want to treat you because this might be an abortion, so go in the car.
Yeah.
In the parking lot, we'll bring you some towels.
Famously, it's being publicized. It happened in Texas already.
And it's likely to happen in a whole lot of other places, and that's why it's such a BFD. EMTALA, I can tell you as a retired physician, directed so much of how the care was done in emergency rooms, emergency departments. And the concept and the idea was that this overrides everything. It overrides your insurance, and it should override
it's like life
whatever
and death, guys.
State law that claims this, that, or something else about abortion. It doesn't matter. Basically, the woman is coming to the emergency room because she has a problem. Her life might be in danger, and the states are saying, we don't care. What really matters is the unborn child. Mm-hmm. That far outranks anything that has to do with the woman, and so suck it up. Here's your towels. Mm-hmm. We made spaces in the emergency room, the parking lot for you. You know, we carve out these areas for the handicapped to get closer to the door. And then here are the pregnant women spaces.
Yeah.
You can stay there, but you can't come in.
Wow.
And we won't treat you. That's how bad this is.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important.
All right.
And if anybody who thinks I'm exaggerating, I'm not.
No, well, we heard from Joan yesterday. I mean, it's gotten so bad. I mean, we've heard all the red states that have, for some reason, adopted by margins of 60% plus in some cases, new constitutional amendments guaranteeing certain abortion rights that everyone is shocked that such a red state would adopt. But as it turns out, if you tell people the hospital systems that you have been relying on, and which in some cases you've been paying for all your life, will simply turn you away. They have to turn you away to die in the parking lot because idiots in the state legislature don't know what they're doing. Well, it's causing a bit of a backlash, and that even Montana and Idaho now looking like they're going to get abortion rights referenda on their ballot in November. Idaho. Of course, that too comes from backlash of doctors now telling their obstetricians having to tell their patients, in addition to everything else you need to do to take care of yourself and afford yourself prenatal care, you also should go out and buy life flight insurance so that if you get hit with a $50,000 bill for being helicoptered out of the state because no one here can treat you, if there's a complication, you need to be covered. What? That's going to bring some people to the polls in a very irritated condition.
Irritated people vote.
Yeah. And people who feel like they're being bankrupted by idiots in their state legislature will come out.
Right. So then let's move from that court to this court. So now we have the whole circus.
The Fifth Circus
yesterday
Court
in
of Appeals.
New York.
Oh,
and what's so fascinating about that is that it wasn't the circus that Donald Trump wanted. This has been such a bad week for him.
He does love the circus. But he's the color of a circus peanut. That's the reason.
That's right. And, you know, he wants to be the ringmaster, and he's not. He's the janitor who cleans up after the elephants.
He may even be what the elephants are leaving for the janitors.
You never know. So he is in court yet again for another day. Not today, because today's Wednesday, and Wednesdays they don't do it.
Good point. Okay.
But he comes in on Tuesday, and before we even get to the resumption of David Pecker's testimony, which in and of itself is worth a 2-hour show, the judge Marchand starts off with a contempt hearing.
He did.
Okay. And the contempt hearing is that the DA, the district attorney, the prosecutors, bring up 10 specific cases of Trump defying the gag order.
That sounds like a lot, but it's probably only a portion of them.
But those are the ones they settled on, and the 10th one out of 10 was the big one.
10 out of 10.
So, and I'll tell you why.
All right.
But what the actual order says, the court order says, the defendant is directed to refrain from, this is March 26, 2024, ordered,
Mm-hmm.
making or directing others to make public statements about known or reasonably foreseeable witnesses concerning their potential participation in the investigation or in the criminal proceeding, or counsel in the case other than the DA, or members of the court staff and district attorney's staff, or family members, if those statements are made with the intent to materially interfere with or cause others to materially interfere with counsel's or staff's work in the criminal case, or making and directing others to make public statements about any prospective juror or any juror in this criminal proceeding. So you can say what you want about the judge, and Trump does. You can say what you want about the trial. You can say what you want about Ted Cruz. But you can't talk about the witnesses
Ted Cruz
or family members of the staff.
Okay.
You can't do those things.
Right. I would just do the Ted Cruz thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Mershon says 2 matters have been called into the record. And this comes from Adam Classfield being in the courtroom and writing this stuff down. On April 15th, prosecutors asked this court to sign an order to show cause on allegations Trump violated the gag order on 3 occasions. Then they did so 7 more times.
Yes, sounds
right.
Okay,
and he gives examples. For example, here's the first. Michael Avenatti writes, "We can't be hypocrites when it comes to the First Amendment. It's outrageous that Cohen and Daniels can do countless interviews and Trump can't, basically."
Well,
and Trump says, "Thank you to Michael Avenatti for revealing the truth about 2 sleazebags. That is to say, Daniels and Cohen, who are witnesses.
Yeah, well,
this violates the gag order."
Yes, and I mean Avenatti, just like I don't know where that came from. The idea, well, how come
Avenatti's
he can do it?
Actually probably going to be a witness for Trump. Yeah, well, for all we know,
maybe
he's a sleazeball too.
A possibility.
But as the prosecution is fond of saying to the jury in these cases, this is a criminal case. We didn't choose these witnesses; they chose the defendant.
Okay.
So, yeah, they're not Boy Scouts, they're not librarians, they're not nuns. However, everything they say, we got tapes, we got writing, we got, corroboration.
Yeah. They do.
So the second, posted 5 days before jury selection, to whom it may concern, over the past few weeks, I've been asked countless times, this is Stormy Daniels, to comment on reports of an alleged sexual relationship. I don't have one. And with Donald Trump. And this was done under duress, as it turns out later, but that doesn't matter. Trump writes, "Look what was just found. Will the fake news reported?" In other words, he's pressuring Stormy Daniels, who is going to be a witness. Can't do that. This is the third. Here again, Judge Michael Cohen. Okay, so he does something with Michael Cohen.
All right.
2 more alleged violations sharing the same news articles, one with the "in case you missed it" tag. This one, the 9th, screenshots an article going after Michael Cohen. And then the one that they spent so much time going over.
Yeah, the 10th one.
The 10th one. Jesse Waters.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse with 2 T Waters.
Yes.
Is on Fox News.
Right.
And he says live on the air, they are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge.
Oh, to get on the jury.
No, that's what Trump said. That's the point. Oh. Jesse Waters says they're catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge.
All right.
Trump takes that statement, which wasn't tweeted, it was said on the air.
Oh, okay.
Writes it down.
Well,
in a Truth Social thing, and says they are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge in order to get on the Trump jury. Words that Trump adds. Quotes it as Jesse Waters.
Oh. Well, I mean,
the next day, the prosecutor notes, a juror winds up getting cold feet because of the fear of disclosure of personal information. We end up losing a juror. There's no doubt the defendant made these statements. And Marchand starts hammering Todd Blanche, Trump's lawyer.
Yeah.
How is this a retweet or repost when Trump had to do the keystrokes in order to type this in, and then he added his own words?
Yeah, okay, I see.
So how, in what universe, is this simply a repost and not a violation of the gag order. And basically Todd Blanche says, and I'm going to summarize here a little bit.
Yes.
Says, well, it wasn't. And Mershon said, what case law are you using to justify what you just said? And Blanche says, well, it's common sense, Your Honor.
But it's no.
And Mershon says, what? And these are repeated attacks. You say that Trump is responding to repeated attacks, but Trump's attacks, according to the timestamps, predate some of the comments that Trump is, quote, responding to, unquote. And Blanche says, he's running for president. He has to respond to that. And then Blanche turns to the judge and says, Your Honor says the timing matters. Why? And Merchant says, I'm asking the questions.
Okay. Well, that's a thing you can do when you're the judge.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. And of course to ask, well, do you have any precedent? Do you have any case law for your interpretation? And he says, well, no, but that's important in a court. That's kind of what we rely on. So I don't know.
So you're suggesting that because the people of the court don't take action for any violation. In other words, he did this before and you didn't do anything about it. That's another of Blanche's arguments.
Yeah, well.
Merchant says, well, that suggests because the people of the court don't take action for every single violation, the gag order is waived.
Yeah.
And Blanche says, that's not what we're saying. And the judge says, yes, that is what you're saying.
Well, it is what he's saying. He should have just said, yeah, actually, maybe. I mean, I didn't want to suggest it, but Your Honor did. So, yes, that's the
Blanche
answer.
says that reposting an article from a news site doesn't violate the gag order. And Merchant says, where is the case law that supports that?
Yeah.
And Blanche says, I don't have any case law.
Well, there may not be any. That's true. I don't know how many gag orders there have been about someone who's so active on social media. That may be the first.
Merchant asks him again, show me, where's the law that says that what you're saying is true? Blanche can't. Merchant says to Blanche, are you testifying for your client? And Blanche says, I'm not testifying. I'm making arguments. And then Merchant again notes when Trump added words to the end of that post.
That's pretty.
And Trump said, well, he's being very careful to comply. And Merchant just loses it and says, Mr. Blanche, you are losing all credibility.
Yeah.
He says to Trump's main defense lawyer on basically the second day of witness testimony.
Yeah.
Of what's going to be a 6-week trial.
Yeah, and I imagine that
and then says, you know what,
not there for
I'm going to reserve decision on this. We've already wasted enough time on this. Let's get to actually David Pecker sitting on the stand. We're done. 10-minute break. And Todd Blanche is noticeably uncomfortable.
Yeah, and
that
now
was
it's dawning on him.
Major dressing down by the judge. And all the reporters who were doing there says, this is
a major dressing
bad.
down.
This is like really bad.
Yeah.
For the lawyer. This is like he's going to be sanctioned.
Thinking back to the profile that we read of Blanche before the trial actually began about how much he's putting on the line. He left, he had a solid career in public service law at the prosecutor's office, and then went and got a prestigious partnership at a big name firm and gave it all up to do this Trump thing. And now there's judges saying you're losing all your
Trump
credibility.
Dies. It's one of those.
Yep.
He's a very good lawyer. The problem, as many people have pointed out, isn't his skills, although this is the first time he's doing a big case as a defense lawyer. But defense lawyers who were former prosecutors have an advantage in the sense that they have pretty good idea of how prosecutors think. Still, the problem isn't Todd Blanche or his legal skills or the judge. The problem is his client.
Yes.
His client is not permitting him to use the arguments that you would use. Well, I'm sorry, my client didn't fully understand. He didn't, get what he was supposed to do. He made a mistake. It wasn't intentional. Trump won't allow any of that. Whatever I do, I never make a mistake. I'm going to do it again. I want to do it tomorrow. Don't argue that I somehow didn't understand. Because then if I do it tomorrow, I won't be able to make that. You have to argue that it's okay for me to do it.
Yeah, that's
Blanche is
rough.
stuck. He goes to the judge. The judge sees right through this and said, buddy, you're in trouble.
That's your problem. But that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. And I think that probably had a lot to do with the fact that I guess there were like multiple objections to Blanche's opening arguments, which is not something that you see from happening to an experienced trial attorney ordinarily. There's very clear and well understood by practicing attorneys anyway, rules about what you can and cannot say in an opening
argument. What you would
argument.
and wouldn't say, even if it's not allowed.
Yeah.
You know, there's a style, there's a thing that you do. You tell a story so that the jury can understand it.
Yes.
And the prosecution was laying out, here's what we're going to do, here's the evidence you're going to see, this is how it fits into the case. And the defense is saying, you know, you have to understand, Trump's a family man. We don't have to prove he's innocent. You have to prove he's guilty. Go ahead. I dare you. You know, and one went over better than the other, at least with the reporters. We don't know how the jury feels.
Yeah. Well, one went over better with the judge than the others. I mean, the thing that you can't do, because it's the opening argument and no evidence has been presented yet, is you can't make conclusions from the evidence before you present the evidence.
Right.
And you know, the way around doing it usually is you say, well, we're going to show you evidence that the defendant did this and the defendant did that. So be on the lookout for that evidence, and that's permissible. But what you can say is, look, you know, the fact is, once you've seen the evidence, you will have to conclude that, right. Now that you need for the closing, but that's an objectionable statement in the opening. And he did it like 3 times, and that sounds like the sort of thing that Trump said, I don't care if you get in trouble. You go up there and you say, I'm not guilty and you can't hold me for this. Okay.
So this is all happening. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom,
yes,
the hordes of Trump supporters making noise, making it another January 6th, supporting him in every possible way, shape, and form.
Donald Trump.
Amounted to
Donald Trump. Yeah.
One person.
That was him. Right
no, there's
background.
one
Free
Trump supporter
Trump.
outside.
Yeah.
Single. That's O-N-E. One.
O-N-E. That's a new pro-Trump network.
Yeah, exactly.
When they say One American News, that was the One American.
That thousands of people were being turned away and kept away by the cops because he's got even less support this time than he did when he was indicted. Remember all the indictment court situations in New York for him, where the reporters outnumbered the protesters. Marjorie Taylor Greene came. There were like 8 people, and she left. Do you remember that one?
Vaguely. That happened. Seems like
because there was nobody there.
Every day.
She couldn't make noise because there was nobody there to listen. You know, if a tree falls in the forest and all that. Yeah. So, like, this was even worse. Like, nobody cared. It was New York.
Yeah.
Oh, the former president's on trial in a criminal trial for the first time, and they're going to talk about sleaze and David Pecker and the National Enquirer. You know, that's nice. I'm walking here.
Yeah, they're not interested. And as we learned the other day, there's a lot of the people who did show up to protest. The 1 or 2 people that showed up to protest are astonished, and I guess maybe word will spread, but apparently many people were kept away by the belief that New York City had been bombed out and burned to the ground by Antifa, which, as it turns out, was
you know.
not
And
the
by
case.
the way, you know, elections are rigged, so no point in voting.
Yeah, so don't do it. And Trump is now a big fan of mail-in balloting, apparently.
Yeah. So now, David Pecker's on the stand.
All right.
And David Pecker tells this really compelling story about how tabloids work.
Okay. Let's hear it.
What happens is he meets with Trump and Michael Cohen and In-N-Out Hope Hicks.
Okay.
All of whom are going to be witnesses. And interestingly, witnesses for the prosecution, so you have an idea that they have a story to tell. And again, you don't pick your witnesses. The witnesses pick you.
I guess. Yeah.
And they're going to tell a compelling story that there was a conspiracy to keep information from the public in order to help Trump's campaign.
Yes.
Now, that's important because it's not illegal to pay hush money, but it is illegal to falsify business records. That's a misdemeanor. Mm-hmm. And to falsify business records in furtherance of a crime makes it a felony. And in this case, during David Pecker's testimony, the DA made it known that they're going to cite a specific New York law that makes it a felony, to conspire to conceal information for the purposes of winning an election.
Uh-huh.
There is such a law.
All right.
And it's a state law.
That's
and
nice.
So Jed Sugarman and the other legal eagles are saying this doesn't rise up to what we consider to be a textbook case of a crime that should be prosecuted. Well, the DA is laying out I got all that stuff. Everything you're complaining about, I got. I'm laying it out, and I have the law. The law's on my side. I'm going to do this. And so the fact that it hasn't been done before is only because we didn't have a president who ever did this before. So,
okay.
Well,
I guess if it's a relatively new law, this one about the conspiracy to conspire to, I don't know what, affect the outcome,
with an election,
interfere with an election,
words to that effect.
Sometimes that
words
happens.
Matter, lawyers will say, "Well, you have to give me the exact chapter and verse." So I'm not a lawyer. I'm just telling you what the concept is here.
Right, and sometimes those things are new, and Jed Sugarman and others who are experienced lawyers will have, come up before the provenance of that law, and never having seen it prosecuted before, they say there is no such law. I've never heard of such a thing, or that's not illegal. Well, that's what continuing legal education is for. You have to go every year. Maybe this year that should be the course you take, Jed.
So David Pecker said in this meeting, basically, he offered to be Trump's eyes and ears, find any story that was good for Trump and play it up, and find any story that was bad for Trump and kill it. And that's where the whole catch and kill idea comes. You catch the story, you pay for it, you don't run it, and that's the kill part.
Yeah.
And Pecker was describing the fact that he never really did this before, but he's going to do it for Trump.
Oh.
And that in the process of doing that, he's going to make up a whole bunch of other stuff, like Ted Cruz's father was associated with trying to assassinate Fidel Castro, or this, that, or it. And they have all the headlines from the Inquirer where he did this. And you're looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, we knew the Inquirer was sleazy, but we didn't know it was this sleazy. And we didn't know he all did it in furtherance of the Trump campaign. That was the news coming out of the trial.
Yuck.
Not personal, campaign.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Time to venture forth and catch up with, pretty much everything else that we had on tap for the day. Let's see, I opened this up, and somewhere along the line I also lost our pocket connection here, but we'll open that back up so that we can get back to the other stories we had planned for you. One thing that I saw, as Greg was telling us about the happenings in Congress, and we were sort of speculating on the outcome of the vote in the Senate in terms of the number of Republican senators who switched their votes or who abandoned the Trump position that, either that there can be no wins for the Biden administration, or that there must be a connection to the border in order for there to be anything even approaching an opportunity for the Biden administration to have a win. And this piece in the Hill from Alexander Bolton, which came to me via email, they promote themselves relentlessly in email, was a headline that seemed like it might reveal something in the story about what we were talking about. Gop lawmakers take Trump's policy orders with a grain of salt. That is interesting. And probably there are doctors telling Donald Trump to cut down on the grains of salt that he takes in at this stage of the game, but he's probably not listening to them, just as, the guy who thought, why don't we inject some bleach, is probably not going to follow doctor's orders a great deal. So until he finds another doctor who will take orders from him about what orders to give him, that might work. Anyway, let's see. The piece begins this way. Republicans in Congress are taking former President Trump's policy directives with more than a few grains of salt, as it turns out, signaling they view what he says about issues as mainly for dramatic effect on the campaign trail. That's probably true. And, you would have thought that they would have made that clearer earlier. Congress passed an extension of the warrantless surveillance program and sent to President Biden a major foreign aid package that includes $61 billion for Ukraine. Trump supported neither effort. He publicly opposed the reauthorization of the FISA program and aid to Ukraine because, he just has not got the interests of the national security establishment at heart anyway, if not necessarily the entirety of the country. It's not as if Republicans are ignoring Trump, though. More House Republicans voted against money for Ukraine than for it. But Trump's 0-2 record on Congress's big policy bills shows GOP leaders who differ with Trump on policy, notably Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, can still wield influence. And Speaker Mike Johnson, while aligned with Trump, has not been afraid to put measures on the House floor that Trump disagrees with. Two of Trump's staunchest allies in the House, Representatives Murdery Trader Green and Matt Gaetz, led opposition to Ukraine funding in the House. Green has even filed, a motion to vacate the Speaker's chair to boot Johnson out of his job because of her displeasure. So there you go. You have to listen to me because I have displeasure over how he handled the issue. Senate Republican Whip John Thune on Tuesday praised Johnson for managing Trump's opposition and helping convince the former president to back away from his full-throated attempt to derail the Ukraine funding package when it came to the Senate floor in February. His engagement, I think, with the former president probably was helpful because, everything is shift here, because there was a fairly strong position prior in opposition. It's a weird, stilted way of saying it, but okay. That Thune had said of Johnson's recent outreach to Trump, including a trip to Pervalago in mid-April. Trump made waves in February when he declared at a campaign rally, just off the cuff without telling anybody, in South Carolina, that he told, quote, one of the presidents of a big country, unquote, whatever that means, that if NATO allies didn't pay their dues, he would not come to their aid if attacked by Russian forces, and would instead encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. Shortly before, the Senate voted on its $95 billion foreign aid package, which included $61 billion for Ukraine 2 months ago. Trump posted on his social media website, all caps, "We should never give any money anymore without the hope of payback or without strings attached." The strings is in quotes here. "The United States of America should be, quote, stupid, unquote, no longer," Trump posted. The likely GOP nominee for president warned in February of last year that Biden was systematically, but perhaps unknowingly, someone else wrote this one, pushing us into what could be World War III by intervening in the Ukrainian war. The Senate nevertheless went ahead and passed money for Ukraine with 70 votes in February, including the support of 22 Republicans. McConnell hailed that vote as a major success because he garnered the support of nearly half of his conference, even though Trump was making calls, lobbying against the bill. He won a bigger victory Tuesday when 31 Republicans voted to advance the House-approved foreign aid package, which largely resembled the bill that was on the Senate floor 2 months ago. The Senate GOP leader blamed former Fox News host Tucker Carlson for leading the demonization of U.S. support for the war in Ukraine and said Trump voiced mixed views on the issue. He loves to flip-flop anywhere he can, I'm guessing. While many MAGA-aligned Republicans and Senate Republican candidates continue to espouse isolationist views, it's not isolationist, it's pro-Russian. That's different. That's teaming up with a foreign power to change it's permissible, presumably, if you wanted to decide, even up to and including on pursuing political union with Russia to own the globalists, you can do it, but it's not isolationist. That's, I think, a misnomer. Anyway, they continue to espouse, let's say, we'll put a new label on it, dumb views when it comes to the war and the NATO alliance. McConnell on Tuesday now thinks that his side has the upper hand after the overwhelming Senate vote. I think we've what? Well, I think there's a word missing here. He's probably saying, I think we've turned the corner, because I doubt very much that he would have said, I think we've the corner on this argument. We have the corner, We are now occupying the corner and getting ready to turn it. I don't know. I think we've turned the corner on this argument, I assume. We went from 22 Senate Republican votes to at least 30, he noted. The House Gops conference is about 50-50, as we thought would happen if they voted on it. And it wasn't, well, it was about 50-50, but it was 56-44 in favor of in opposition to Ukraine aid. So it's about 50-50, but the majority, and a clear majority, were against it. 31 Gops senators voted to advance the bill on Tuesday, 8 more than who voted for it earlier this year. On Saturday, 101 House Republicans voted for the Ukraine aid, while 112 voted against it. I think we've turned the corner on the isolationist movement. So I knew he meant turned the corner. This is the second usage of turned the corner, but also turning the corner on the isolationist movement, which again is a favorable for Republicans misnomer. It's not isolationist, it's pro-Russian. I've noticed how uncomfortable the proponents of that are when you call them isolationists. I don't even think that that's true. I think we've made some progress, McConnell told reporters. Senator J.D. Vance, the idiot from Ohio, who played a leading role in opposing the Ukraine aid package because he's a pro-Russian sucker, said Trump kept largely quiet, actually, he says, about the bill in recent weeks because he wants to preserve his leverage to end the conflict if elected president in November. It won't end the conflict. It will just surrender the American position in it. But I think that he has intentionally stayed out of this. No, he hasn't. He doesn't involve himself in every single debate that we have over here. He could have weighed in, and I think he very intentionally chose not to because he saw it was a losing hand, of course, and decided not to play. But in the initial rounds, he was betting against Ukraine, for sure. The argument Trump has made in this would never have happened if he were president, is that this would never have happened if he were president, except it did. And he wants the killing to stop. And I think it's important for him to actually maintain some leverage and flexibility when he becomes president, Vance added. And again, this too is a misunderstanding of everything. And the result of having mislabeled what was going on in Ukraine all this time, as people came to believe that the Russian invasion of Ukraine came in 2022? But of course, Russia was invading Crimea and claiming to annex it. Actually, before the Trump administration. That's true. You could point to the Obama administration, I suppose, if you wanted to put blame on them. But for some reason, everybody forgets that, of course, also the Donbass region, is that the right name of the region? The eastern Ukraine was being contested by Russian-backed Ukrainian, maybe, quote-unquote, Ukrainian separatists for all of that time. Up to and including shooting down foreign aircraft that were flying over the region. How that supposedly, the shooting down the aircraft happened again during the Trump administration, but how you come to believe that active combat between Russian-backed separatists and Ukrainian forces in Ukraine during the Trump administration means that this would never have happened while Trump was president. Well, I guess I was going to say, I don't know how you come to that conclusion. Well, you have to be J.D. Vance to come to that conclusion. Anyway, Trump played a more active role this month when he urged Gops lawmakers to kill FISA. Kill FISA. It was illegally used against me and many others. They spied on my campaign, Trump posted on Truth Social. That, however, didn't stop a 2-year reauthorization of FISA's warrantless surveillance program from passing both chambers with strong bipartisan support. A majority of House Republicans, 126, actually voted for that bill, while 88 voted against it. And they probably laughed about it being 88 as well, because they're Nazis. In the Senate, 30 Republicans voted for the extension of surveillance powers, while 16 voted no. Alarmed Gops lawmakers rebelled against Trump's call to block the reauthorization of the spy program. They argued that letting it lapse would put the nation at risk. It would also have put their consistency at risk. Many of them got elected in the first place or stayed elected earlier in their career by insisting that FISA always had to be reauthorized, and the Democrats who were soft on crime were the ones who were against reauthorization and couldn't find their way back out of that. Alarmed Gops lawmakers rebelled against his call to reauthorize the spy program, right? I'm very disappointed in President Trump's assessment of FISA. Here's a quote. It is an essential tool. It may need to be amended, but it is absolutely essential. As everyone in the intelligence community will tell you, said the very concerned Senator Susan Collins, who I guess probably thinks Trump has learned his lesson from this. She, of course, a senior member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Marco Rubio, Republican vice chair of the Intelligence Committee, warned that if we can't spy on foreign terrorists and foreign spies overseas, we're out of the intelligence business. Rubio noted to The Hill on Tuesday that Republicans voted to reauthorize FISA's warrantless surveillance program with Trump's support when he was president. So, whatever. It wasn't until later that he realized, oh no, they're using it against me because I'm a foreign spy. And he pointed out that Trump was wrong to blame the FBI wiretap on his former campaign aide Carter Page in 2016 on the surveillance program authorized by FISA's Section 702, which was the law reauthorized by Congress last week. We actually had reforms in this bill that would have prevented potentially them from even getting that warrant. In the one we just passed, you can't use political opposition research as part of your warrant request, he pointed out in response to Trump's criticism. We'll see. Rubio said Trump never weighed in with him directly about the reauthorization program, despite his attention-grabbing posts on Truth Social. Lindsey Graham, one of Trump's closest allies in the Senate, believe it or not, argued that Trump had an influence on both the Ukraine funding package and the FISA reauthorization by demanding that some of the aid to Ukraine come in the form of a loan, and to limit the FISA extension to 2 years instead of 5 years. That's what Joan was telling us yesterday. The House included a provision directing the president to structure $10 billion in economic assistance to Ukraine as a loan, but it also gave Biden or a future president the power to waive repayment. So $61 billion in total, $10 billion of it can be called a loan. Anyway, he supported it as a loan and it passed, Graham argued. He said, I will support a loan, and part of it is a loan, part of it. Anyway, he said he supported FISA for 2 years, not 5. He didn't oppose FISA forever, Graham said of Trump's stance on warrantless surveillance. When they said, we'll make it 2 years so we can review it again, he said, okay. And Graham predicted a larger portion of any future Ukraine assistance package will be set up as a loan. He thinks the number will go beyond $10 billion. And I guess why not? If you think it's advantageous and you're going to waive it anyway. So there you have it. That, I think, helps summarize and explain kind of where they are on all of this and why it is that Republicans are shaking loose from Trump's control over this thing. All right, let's see. A couple of other things that we could and should share with you floating out here. Well, let's see. What can we share? I've got a couple of, actually, there are a couple of Rosalind McGregor segments that we were looking to catch up with, and maybe we can run through them. They're not all that long. There are two different ones, and I'm not sure which one is the more salient of the two. Oh, actually, the second, I think, probably will work. Let me see, though. Maybe I need to wait until after the break to set that up. Although I think I can probably fit this into the soundboard right here. Well, and we got the time. Let's run it. The second of two installments we're still waiting to play, which I had forgotten. We're sitting and waiting here, and came to us in late March. So almost a month ago, we had the heads up about this one. And this one has, I guess, new developments in it. But I don't know what the developments are. Let me tell you, well, why don't we just roll the tape here and catch up on this, and apologize to Rosalind for letting this sit for so long. But this one has some national implications and was a little bit surprising. And, well, let's roll it. Let's do it.
Good morning, David.
Good morning.
I'm afraid the news for today is that the particular Michigan disease that is called Ottawa Impact may be headed to Washington, D.C.
No.
It turns out that Ottawa County Commissioner Rebecca Curran has confirmed to the local Grand Rapids TV station that she will run for Michigan's open U.S. Senate seat as a Republican. For those who don't remember, Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow has said she will retire at the end of her term. Alyssa Slotkin is the main Democratic candidate hoping to fill her shoes, but there are several Republicans hoping to land the seat instead. Quote, America has always been a land where diverse people can come together and create a unique and wonderful bond, Coran said. That allowed each American to live their life by their own conscience without any interference from their government. That is no longer the case, and it concerns me deeply. This is my country, and I will not sit idly by while others try to destroy it, unquote. She represents District 7 in Ottawa County with precincts in Georgetown Township. Coran said she was initially vetted by Ottawa Impact, the conservative group led by Chairman Joe Moss, and signed their contract. Ottawa Impact then secured a majority on the board in January of 2023. Coran has often been a swing vote on the board between the Ottawa Impact majority and ideological opponents. Quote, I would call me a wild card, she said. I vote based on the conscience and what is brought up and what I'm hearing from my constituents, unquote. The Ottawa County Board has been marked by several legal controversies during her tenure, including a more than year-long legal fight over an attempt to oust County Health Officer Adeline Hambley. Lawyers for both sides finally ended their dispute recently, allowing Hambley to remain in her role with protections going forward. Quote, don't you feel like you're in D.C. and Ottawa County? Coran said. I know I do. If Ottawa County is not preparation for Washington, D.C., I don't know what is, unquote.
She may not know.
Coran said her goal as commissioner and as a potential senator is to bring people together. Quote, show them we have far more in common than we do that divides us while dealing with the issues, she said. In the Republican primary, Coran would be up against former U.S. Rep. Peter Meyer, related to the founder of the regional Meyer's Thrifty Acres grocery store chain, and former U.S. Reps. Mike Rogers and Justin Amash. When asked how she will separate herself from those high-profile candidates, Coran said, quote, the people will separate me, the people will choose me, and they will decide they want to work with me, unquote. The county commissioner said she was also driven to run because of the situation at the border, as well as high inflation. According to her online biography, Coran was a sales and marketing professional, but began working in politics and fundraising in 2012. She has worked for the Family Foundation, Amanda Chase for Virginia State Senator, and Governor Ben Carson's presidential super PAC and Trump Victory. Coran must collect at least 15,000 signatures by April 23rd to get on the ballot. The Republican primary is set for August 6th. Let's hope this kind of crazy stays isolated to Western Michigan and Alyssa Slotkin wins the day. Back to you, David.
All right. Well, I couldn't contain myself during some of that. I definitely would have stopped about 5 times during that reading just to make extra comment. But she's just giving us the news. Reading us the article, so playing a great role. I'll comment on these things anyway. By the way, so as she said, Rebecca, and this is interesting, I'm sure that I've been calling her, if I've mentioned her name at all, Curran, Rebecca Curran, but at Curran, Curran, I would have thought, yeah, Curran. Interesting that she's chosen to, she may not have made the selection. I'm sure the family has been calling themselves Curran for a long time, but it's interesting in the Islamophobic atmosphere where we sometimes operate, that you would choose that pronunciation for your last name. Anyway, so 1, I learned about that, and 2, I just learned, well, what an ego, by the way. I mean, I know you have to have an ego to participate in politics at all, electoral politics. She's a county commissioner. That's some leap, by the way. County commissioner to United States Senate. I don't know. I mean, people have leapt from absolutely nothing to the United States Senate, so I guess it's possible. But we heard right at the end of her segment there that she has until April 23rd to collect 15,000 signatures. And so I was wondering, how'd you do? Because today is April 24th. And I'll tell you what, the news search for Rebecca Curran gives me nothing outside or within the last month. All the news mentions of her is that she's, going to run for U.S. Senate. Except it doesn't look like she's going to, because I have no reports of her making the ballot. And I do have, I went on a search last night as I was preparing to get this story finally on the air. All I could find from Bridge, Michigan, .com, was this report on, and it seemed like a promising one. And where's the headline in this thing? It says being hidden by a pop-up. Yes. Who's running for U.S. Senate in Michigan? That's a good question. And presumably if the answer does not include Rebecca Caran, then we know what happened with her quest for 15,000 signatures, I guess. Who's running for U.S. Senate in Michigan? Race is on to succeed Debbie Stabenow. So, okay, that sets things up. Who are we looking at here? Lauren Gibbons and Jonathan Oosting, or Oosting, O-O-S-T-I-N-G, but I bet it's Oosting. Anyway, this tells us that, let's see, the final Republican field for U.S. Senate includes, as Rosalind told us, Mike Rogers, Justin Amash, and Peter Meyer. That much we knew. And then on the Democratic side, apparently, Alyssa Slotkin and actor Hill Harper and businessman Nasser, Beydoun, B-E-Y-D-O-U-N. Round out the Democratic primary field. 4 candidates missed the filing deadline for Michigan's open U.S. Senate seat. This again, although, how is this? This is interesting. The article is dated, it's from the future, July 23rd, 2024. That seems like maybe that was supposed to be April 23rd, 2024. But whatever reason, it's dated July. So, I'm coming to you from the future. A crowded race for Michigan's open U.S. Senate seat narrowed on Tuesday as 4 candidates failed to submit required petition signatures by the state filing deadline. And who's mentioned here? Sharon Savage, Benson Samuel, Glenn Wilson, and J.D. Wilson. How do you like that? Another J.D. Each of whom had previously declared for the races. Republicans are now out, according to an unofficial list from the Michigan Secretary of State. Okay, so does that mean that she got her 15,000 and is in? And the answer is, I don't know, because she's not mentioned anywhere in this story, at least not according to my reading from last night. Maybe it's been updated. I don't know. That leaves 5 Republicans and 3 Democrats to compete in the August 6th primaries for the chance to replace retiring U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow, a fixture in Michigan politics who has held the seat since 2001. The race is expected to be one of the most competitive in the country as Republicans seek to flip the seat and Democrats seek to maintain their narrow majority in the Senate. U.S. Representative Alyssa Slotkin, who's giving up her post in the House to run for Senate, has dominated the early fundraising battle and headlines a Democratic field that also includes actor Hill Harper and businessman Nasser Beydoun. Let's see. Among Republicans, former U.S. Representative Mike Rogers is racking up early endorsements and donations, but he faces competition from former U.S. Representatives Justin Amash and Peter Meyer, names we know, and also wealthy businessman Sandy Pensler and early grassroots favorite Sherry O'Donnell. Michigan has favored Democrats in recent statewide elections, but former President Donald Trump won the state in 2016 and only narrowly lost in, well, it says 2016, but we know that must mean 2020. Although, hey, you used to say that you can't both win and lose a state, but then again, in 2020, Donald Trump lost the state, but said he won it. So I suppose you could say you both won and lost in 2016 as well. Anything's possible. Plus, this article's from the future. We may have that technology by July. With Trump and President Joe Biden again expected to top the November 5th general election ballot, Republicans believe the seat is in play. While third parties can still nominate their candidates at conventions, the major party primary fields are set. Here's more information about each candidate, if you're interested. Nasser Beydoun, which I wonder if that's derivative of Bedouin. Is he a Bedouin? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. Anyway, he, a Dearborn businessman, is a restaurant owner and former chair of the American Arab Chamber of Commerce. He describes himself as a political moderate and civil rights advocate. He's the son of a Lebanese immigrant who found his footing in Michigan as a UAW member. Can't go wrong with that, according to Bedouin's campaign. Then there's Hill Harper. We might as well tell us all about the Democratic candidates who are out there, right? Let's see. Hill Harper, an actor known for his roles in The Good Doctor and CSI New York. Harper is also an attorney, single father, author, and coffee shop owner. That'll make you popular, even if the attorney part won't. The son of two doctors. Harper was born in Iowa and moved to Detroit in 2016. He's a graduate of Harvard University, a cancer survivor. Harper, in 2012, was appointed to a cancer panel by then-President Barack Obama. And then, of course, there's Alyssa Slotkin, about whom we know a bit more. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got one last chance to tell you a little bit more about who's running for Senate in Michigan, but also to point out who's not listed as running for Senate in Michigan. But Alyssa Slotkin deserves her due in this recitation of the candidates and their basic background stories. The current U.S. representative for Michigan's 7th District, Slotkin has served in Congress since 2019 and currently lives in Lansing. She previously worked as a Department of Defense official and an analyst for the Central Intelligence Agency. Born in New York, but raised in Oakland County, Slotkin has degrees from Cornell and Columbia universities. Columbia much in the news these days. I wonder if she's got anything to say about that. On the Republican side, which is how we got here, Justin Amash, or Amash, sorry. I used to go with Amash, but I don't know. I kind of like that pronunciation. But Amash, I think, is the way that Rosalind points out it is said locally. The former representative, a Trump critic who quit the Republican Party in 2019, formed an exploratory committee for U.S. Senate, and on February 29th, the very last chance he had in February this year, announced he'd join the Gops primary. We left the Republican Party, but now I find out that they could give me a line on the ballot, so I'm back in. If elected, Amash said he'd aim to limit an overgrown and abusive government that strives to centralize power and snuff out individualism. Okay, says the guy who left the party because of individualism and then said, oh my God, I got to get back in the party. Peter Meijer, of course, former U.S. representative as well, Grand Rapids Republican in 2022, lost his bid for a second term in Congress after voting to impeach former President Donald Trump for inciting Capitol riots. Meijer served in the U.S. Army Reserve and conducted intelligence operations in Iraq. He's a member of the Meijer family that owns the Michigan-based Superstore chain. And then there was Sherry O'Donnell. Remember that she was one of the early grassroots favorites, right? A physician, pastor, and author from Stevensville. Just cannot make up her mind which one to be. But you can be all of them. Stevensville is it Berrien County? Berrien. O'Donnell champions medical freedom. Uh-oh. Sounds weird. And opposes a government takeover of healthcare, among other things. According to her website, she has never held elected office, but ran for Congress last year, losing to incumbent U.S. Representative Tim Walberg in a 5th District Gop primary. Oh yeah, that guy. He's been in the news lately for something, hasn't he? Okay. What was it, by the way? I don't know. I should look that up. Tim Walberg. Why is he ringing a bell? What's he done lately that has put him in front of our eyes? Oh, yes, okay. Tim Walberg was the guy who suggested that Gaza should be handled like Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Okay. Wow. Not sure what to make of how that primary went. Holy moly. Anyway, I guess it went poorly. Who else is running? Mike Rogers. The Livingston County Republican represented Michigan's 8th congressional district in the U.S. House through 2014. In announcing his campaign, Rogers said he thought he had put politics behind me, but not behind me, but behind him, of course. But that's what he said. And he was inspired to run for the U.S. Senate because something is broken. Okay, I thought it was going to be God told me. Anyway, he recently moved back to Michigan from Florida, and is a former FBI special agent and chaired the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. I remember those days. But back to Michigan from Florida. Oh, a Senate seat is open. Has Harold Ford got a helicopter I can borrow? Back to Michigan. Who's not running anymore? Now, this is interesting, too, because as I flipped through this last night, I didn't even see Rebecca Curran listed in who's not running anymore. So I don't know what happened to her, but it makes the story about her really interesting. People are telling me I should be running. She had the whole inspirational story, and this is the reason I'm running. And now she was so not on the radar that she's literally not in the story about, well, who's not even in it anymore. But in case you were wondering, does it matter? Do I want to read you I don't want to waste any time reading you the stories about who's not running anymore. But, I mean, all I can tell you is that even the list of losers who didn't even make it to the primaries doesn't include Rebecca Curran. That's, I thought, pretty astonishing. Let's see. The other things that I thought were of some interest in the story that Rosalind was reading about, I guess, down towards the end. I thought that was a weird thing. Like, what was her quote? Don't you feel like you're in D.C. in Ottawa County? What? No. Except insofar as, I suppose, do you mean by living in Ottawa County where we're so divided and there's a radical wackadoodle Republican Party organization? Yeah, okay. I guess in that sense. And then, of course, I know I do. If Ottawa County is not preparation for Washington, D.C., I don't know what is. And I guess what? You don't know what is. You don't even know how to get the signatures to get on the primary ballot. I'm sure you're totally ready for service in Washington, D.C. Okay. Well, at any rate, I just thought that was kind of interesting on the whole. What was the other thing? All right. This is something I feel called to do. That's why I'm making a jump. Except then, as it turns out, she's not making the jump. When asked how she will separate herself from those high-profile candidates, Curran replied, "The people will separate me." They did. "The people will choose me." They did not. "And they will decide they want to work with me." But as far as I can make out, she couldn't even find 15,000 of them willing to sign a piece of paper saying, sure, let's give her a shot at running for the primary election to give her a shot at running for election. So she fell way, way short, and that would be interesting to see if we could get a comment on the record about that from her, but there's really no reason to spend any more time on it here on the show, and probably no time to waste with reporters in Michigan. I just thought that was interesting, and I'd love to know what she may or may not have to say about that if anyone bothers to ask her. All right, we'll save another Still in the wings segment from Roslyn for another day. We still have 2 others to get through before the weekends. And now we can double back and check into a couple of other things that we had parked for you here. And I guess there was the mention of J.D. Vance. And perhaps it might be worth spending a little time on a piece that came highly recommended via social media posts by Robert Kuttner, writing in the American Prospect about J.D. Vance. And I guess the speculation that he might somehow become, or he's positioning himself to try to become heir to the MAGA movement once Trump is either no longer at the head of it or, well, let's say, no longer alive. Maybe. I don't know if that's exactly what he's waiting for, but anyway, this is some speculation about that. MAGA 2.0 is the title he's chosen to run this piece. Can J.D. Vance keep it alive after Trump? We're not post-Trump yet, but that's the speculation. And by the way, this is some, I don't know whether, he's in some very windy conditions. They've taken this picture of him on March 16th at a Trump campaign rally, J.D. Vance, and the wind is making it look like his suit is particularly ill-fitting. But that might have been the costume he was wearing to a Trump campaign. That's what you wear. I've been in a number of conversations, Kuttner tells us, with smart observers of politics who make the following argument. If Biden and the Democrats can just beat Trump this fall, MAGA will gradually splinter and fade. Typically, several reasons are given. First, Trump is a unique specimen, a political unicorn. With his long experience as an entertainer, his intuitive sense of how to rally a base, and his feral facility for making the outrageous endearing to his cult, he has held together a fractious coalition in a way that nobody else could. Look beneath the superficial unity that Trump has wrought, the argument goes, and the Republican coalition is a mass of fissures. Economic nationalists abhor free traders. Fiscal conservatives disagree with supply-siders. Isolationists, if that's the word for them, have little use for the police the world internationalists. Take Trump personally out of the equation, and his working-class zealots might begin to notice that Republican policies do not serve their interests. And there's more. The House is a complete mess, with Speaker, for the moment, Mike Johnson, barely papering over bitter divisions and serving as a de facto agent to the Democrats. Evangelicals support Trump, but would prefer someone who is not such a flagrant hypocrite. Despite the fact that so many mainstream Republican elected officials are calling it quits in disgust, the corporate wing of the Gops is still potent and would revive once Trump is gone. All of this is true, but the modern Republican Party has been a bundle of contradictions at least since Ronald Reagan. And as long as Republican rule has produced tax cuts and deregulation, the socially urbane corporate types who hire gays, believe in abortions, and want global alliances have been happy to hold their noses and vote in coalition with fundamentalist rubes whom they privately ridicule. When it comes to personalities who might keep the MAGA corporate coalition intact, there is only one I really worry about, and that's J.D. Vance. With the publication in 2016 of his best-selling book, Hillbilly Elegy, Vance marketed himself as a self-made man who had risen above his troubled origins. For Vance, poverty was all about self-defeating values. In my review of his book in the Prospect, I described Vance as Charles Murray with a, let's say, crap-eating grin. As I wrote, Hillbilly Elegy turns out to be a very sly piece of work that professes to express great nostalgia and compassion for the hillbilly way of life. Parenthetically, it then says, quote here, Americans call them hillbillies, rednecks, or white trash. I call them neighbors, friends, and family. But Vance is on the trail of a bait and switch. Despite the down-home charm, he ends up sounding condescending to his neighbors and kin. Vance not only excelled at Yale Law, he is now at a Silicon Valley hedge fund. I guess he was then. And according to Vance, you could be too, if you weren't so gall-darned lazy. If you weren't selling your food stamps, blowing off jobs, deserting your kids, and getting stoned on OxyContin. Anyway, By then, Hillbilly Vance had already become a protege of Peter Thiel, the ultra-right tech billionaire. Thiel poured $15 million into Vance's 2022 campaign for the Republican Senate primary in Ohio. It's an awful lot. Vance reminded me of Harold Ickey's withering description of the 1940 Republican nominee for president, Wendell Willkie. An Indianan who also served as a lawyer for wealthy corporations but tried in the campaign to stress his rural roots, Ickes called him the barefoot boy from Wall Street. But when I subsequently appeared with Vance at a public event at Oberlin, I realized that I had underestimated him. In contrast to the bombast of Trump, Vance is a man of intellect and charm. He can be effective at a rally, but also impressive in a discussion. At first, Vance was anti-Trump. During the 2016 campaign, Vance called himself a never-Trumper and said he loathed Trump, and asked on Twitter what percentage of the American population has Donald Trump sexually assaulted. That's pretty amazing that he now is at Trump rallies. By the time of the Ohio Senate race in 2022, Thiel had brokered a fence-mending meeting at Pervalago, and Trump and Vance ended up embracing each other because of all the perviness at Pervalago, I guess. Vance went on to win the primary election against two better-known opponents and handily defeated Democrat Tim Ryan in the general. If anyone can pull off appealing to both MAGA and the corporate base as Trump's heir apparent, Vance can. That's his opinion. Maybe he is right. Let's see. More argument about it. Vance is attempting this by being hyper-local to Trump. I'm sorry, hyper-loyal to Trump. I was like, being hyper-local in his focus? No. Hyper-loyal to Trump and setting forth an America First worldview that's even more far-right and more coherent, somehow, than Trump's, while remaining primarily pro-corporate. Despite the extremism of his views, compared to Trump, he seems reassuringly sane. In the Senate, he's partnered with his Ohio counterpart, Sherrod Brown, on legislation to bolster rail safety after the East Palestine disaster, though the Lever reported that he weakened that bill at the request of corporate lobbyists. He offered support to striking auto workers at the Big Three plants, though he has taken up the Trumpian line that what really harms those workers is the transition to electric vehicles. And these occasional sops to the working class have generally not been repeated in Vance's voting record. His lifetime AFL-CIO score is 0%. Vance can emulate Trump's sheer crassness when he addresses a rally. As he told a group of MAGA supporters in New Hampshire in March, if you listen to the media, they will tell you the inflation crisis of Joe Biden is over, but I'll tell you how bad the inflation crisis is. Hunter Biden told everybody that he couldn't even afford crack cocaine. But unlike Trump, Vance can also come across as soft-spoken, cerebral, and intellectually serious. It is hard to imagine a version of American nationalism more far-fetched than Trump's, but Vance is proposing one. Vance was the Senate leader of a group opposing aid to Ukraine. As he wrote in a New York Times op-ed on April 12th, no matter how many weapons the U.S. supplies, Ukraine is in a war that it can't win, he says. That view is outside the bipartisan consensus, but it's far from crazy. The longer the war drags on, the more that neo-isolationism will have some appeal, even though it's not isolationism. But what's truly radical is the larger ideology of which Vance's Ukraine posture is part. As Vance declared in a major policy address in February, the experts, the bipartisan consensus, of course, got us into Vietnam, a war that lasted nearly 15 years, that saw the destruction of nearly 60,000 American lives. And for what? He analogized the tragedy for Vietnam to the enduring post-9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, despite the fact that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, and the war, in his view, empowered Iran within the region. Now those experts have a new thing that American taxpayers must fund, and must fund indefinitely, Vance concluded, and it's called the conflict in Ukraine. Vance is calling for nothing less than an end to American internationalism, in which each nation is responsible for its own military and economic security. As two seemingly endless wars in Ukraine and Gaza keep dragging on, an ideology of neo-isolation could well gain appeal even among Democrats. In my view, Vance is running to be both Trump's vice presidential candidate and then his successor, but he is not exactly sucking up to Trump. Rather, he is creating his own variant of Trumpian ideology minus the incoherence. He is not proposing to destroy American democracy. He can leave that to Trump. Vance, in contrast to some of the people whose names have been floated for VP, would also reassure on-the-fence voters that if Trump dropped dead in office, a serious person who shares Trump's basic worldview would succeed him. Vance would probably do more for Trump's ticket than Kamala Harris would for Biden's. Vance turns 40 in August. He would be the youngest major party nominee for vice president since Ike put Richard Nixon, then 39, on the Gops ticket in 1952 as a sop to the far right of that era. The one thing that may save America from a Trump-Vance ticket is Trump's own narcissism. He may well be averse to a running mate whose intellect and clarity would upstage him. If I had to bet, I'd bet that Trump's own vanity will save us from Vance, at least this year. But at 40, Vance will be a contender for the presidency at least until the election of 2056. Assuming we are spared a second Trump term, Democrats are kidding themselves if they think that MAGA and its alliance with corporate America will splinter in the aftermath. That's all the more reason for Democrats to work even harder to make clear to working Americans that MAGA and Trumpism are fakes. Vance is only a more refined fake. That's what makes him so dangerous. May well be true. Always a good idea. I don't think there's any reason not to start targeting Vance now. And just a reminder, if you think the odds are stacked against you, and they may be, there was a time when all the same arguments were made about Ron DeSantis, and now he's a bit of a joke at this point. Will he stay that way? I don't know. Could the two of them be persuaded to be pitted against one another and destroy one another? I don't know. But there you have it. We were once told that it was Ron DeSantis who was Trump but serious, Trump but who knew how to actually govern. And in fact, he did not, or at least was willing to forget about how to govern in an attempt to become more Trumpian and to make himself a successor to MAGA, and he destroyed himself. I hope that's lasting. And I hope that J.D. Vance will do the same at some point. Okay, just wanted to sort of get that one on the record. That's been out there hanging there for the last couple of days, I think, and needed to be, as I said, read into the record. There's a couple of other things to share here, and we'll catch up on them. How about, why don't we do this one? This seems of interest to all of us too. I know we've had our eye on it. This has been a serious issue. I, scream all the time about how it's not being taken seriously enough. But Lawfare has a piece put together by, Hunter Evans, Adam George, Quinta Jurasic, and Emma Planky, collaborating on this necessary reminder and update: how states are investigating and prosecuting the Trump fake electors. Really, among the crimes of the century, I would think. And as we remarked in yesterday's show, amazingly, we've gotten to the point to where we are having to consider in tandem reforming both the Electoral Count Act and the Insurrection Act, and maybe even probably the Espionage Act alongside. What an incredible bingo card combination that is. All right. And this is a lengthy one, so let's get to it. Of all the ways that Donald Trump and his allies attempted to overturn the 2020 election, including litigation, bullying, and eventually outright violence, the fake electors scheme was perhaps the most convoluted, and I would say among the most serious. As described by the House's Select Committee on January 6th and Special Counsel Jack Smith's indictment of the former president in Washington, D.C., that is, the effort involved a plan to flip the Electoral College vote to Trump by putting forward alternate slates, in quotes here, of electors, claiming a Trump victory in states won by President-elect Joe Biden. With guidance and encouragement from the Trump campaign and other supporters of the president, Republican officials and party members in 7 states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, New Mexico, Georgia, and Arizona, prepared certificates declaring themselves to represent or potentially represent the rightful electors in those states over the official electors certifying the vote for Biden. The idea was either to flip the electoral tally to Trump outright during Congress's counting of the vote on January 6th, or generate enough legal uncertainty to prevent Mike Pence from certifying Biden's victory. The scheme features prominently in Smith's D.C. indictment of Trump and the indictment of Trump and 18 other co-defendants in Georgia court by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. Those 2 cases have understandably received the most attention. After all, they feature charges against Trump himself. But over the past 3 years, other states targeted by the fake electors plot have conducted their own investigations too. And in some, fake electors are facing criminal charges. With such a sprawling landscape of investigations and prosecutions, it can be difficult to keep track of where everything stands. Here, we've provided an overview of the state of play across the country. In Michigan and Nevada, fake electors are facing criminal prosecution in state court, while a criminal probe continues in Arizona and possibly in Wisconsin as well. Civil litigation in the latter state has also resulted in a settlement barring the Wisconsin fake electors from serving as electors in any contest in which Trump is on the ballot. That's an interesting one. I hadn't heard about that one. Meanwhile, in New Mexico and Pennsylvania, fake electors appear unlikely to face criminal charges. Wonder why that is. Well, here's the rundown, as much of it as we can get through before the end of the show. Anyway, this seems like a good use of our time for today. On July 18th in Michigan, the Attorney General, Dana Nessel, announced felony charges against 16 Michigan residents for their alleged involvement in the fake electors scheme. The defendants, all of whom served as fake electors for Trump in that state, and one of whom gets special mention in the story still waiting in the wings from Rosalind McGregor, by the way. They've been charged for allegedly falsely claiming, it was false, but you have to say these things are alleged, to be official electors from Michigan, signing a fake electoral certificate as a Michigan public record, and attempting to submit that fake certificate to the U.S. Senate and the National Archives. In announcing the charges, Nessel stated, "This remains an ongoing investigation, and the Michigan Department of the Attorney General has not ruled out potential charges against additional defendants." According to the Attorney General's office, the fake electors engaged in this conduct after the Michigan Board of State Canvassers had certified Biden's victory in the state on November 23, 2020, and after courts had already dismissed several lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign challenging vote counting processes in 3 counties. The lawsuits filed by pro-Trump organizations such as True the Vote and Trump Voters in Michigan claimed that the counties failed to provide access for Republican challengers and counted ballots from ineligible voters. Filed complaints, other court documents, and media appearances by pro-Trump surrogates suggest that the lawsuits aimed to instill doubt about the validity of Michigan's election verification processes and potentially delay vote certification beyond Congress's December 8th safe harbor deadline. During this period, President Trump also unsuccessfully pressured Michigan House Speaker Lee Chatfield and Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey to defy Michigan state court and federal court rulings and declare that he had won the state. Each of the defendants faces 8 charges: 1 count of conspiracy to commit forgery, 2 counts of forgery, 1 count of conspiracy to commit uttering and publishing. That's weird sounding, but they explain it. 1 count of uttering and publishing, 1 count of conspiracy to commit election law forgery, and 2 counts of election law forgery. So lots of conspiracy and then actual crime. The latter 2 statutes carry a penalty of up to 5 years in prison. The other crimes are punishable with up to 14 years. The forgery in question refers to the fake electoral certificates, of course. While the first 2 counts concerning forgery and conspiracy to commit forgery are relatively self-explanatory, the charges concerning uttering and publishing may sound strange to readers unfamiliar with Michigan law, although I think we have similar terms here in Virginia. The statute in question makes it a felony offense to forge, falsify, alter, or counterfeit an official record with the intent to injure or defraud. While this criminal provision is typically used to prosecute manipulation of financial instruments, such as counterfeit money or forged checks, Michigan's felony complaint against the fake electors extends its reach to election records. It's a good theory. The last two charges concerning election law forgery and conspiracy to commit election law forgery are relatively new to Michigan law. The election law forgery statute was enacted in 2018 by the Michigan legislature and explicitly prohibits knowingly falsifying an election document. I wonder if that's an analog to the addition to the New York body of laws under which Trump is being charged with interference in an election. Probably a good parallel there. All defendants in Michigan initially pleaded not guilty. In October of 2023, the Attorney General announced a cooperation deal with James Renner, one of the fake electors, and dropped all criminal charges against him. During the same period, the court completed arraignment hearings for the remaining 15 defendants and assigned dates for the preliminary hearings to determine whether prosecutors have provided sufficient evidence to move forward with the criminal proceedings. Judge Kristen Simmons held an initial batch of preliminary hearings over the winter and is scheduled to continue these hearings in April and May. One defendant, Timothy King, was referred for an additional hearing to determine whether he is competent to stand trial. Defendants Clifford Frost and Mary Ann Henry sought to have their charges dismissed, pointing to recent comments by the Attorney General to argue that the state could not prove the necessary intent required for all 8 charges. During a virtual event on September 18th, 2023, Nessel had said that the fake electors, quote, are people who have been brainwashed and, quote, legit believe that former President Donald Trump won the 2020 election. The Attorney General's office responded by arguing that the comments were Nessel's personal opinion, intended for a private audience, and that the comments are not relevant for the state's legal action against the defendants. Well, there's more, even just from Michigan. And don't forget, there's 6 other states where this stuff might be happening. We're due for an update.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, perhaps we can continue with that update tomorrow or on into Friday. In the meantime, time now for Justice Putnam to take over the mic for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next right here on Netroots Radio. What's up? Trump attorney Todd Blanche had a disastrous show in his show cause hearing, anyway, with Judge Merchan over Trump's gag order. Stay tuned.